Back in 1993, a scandal erupted that would completely change the public image of arguably the biggest pop star on the planet. So today, we're going to break down the facts of those pivotal allegations against Michael Jackson, how they started, how the investigation unfolded, and the legacy they ultimately left behind. To really get the shockwave this whole thing caused, you have to picture the scene. In early 1993, Michael Jackson wasn't just a pop star. He was a global phenomenon. Honestly, his fame was on another planet, at its absolute peak. And that's what made the allegations that were about to come out so seismic. And at the very heart of his incredible, almost mythical fame was his Neverland Ranch. It was right there that a friendship, one that seemed totally innocent at first, would kick off and set the stage for everything that came next. So how did this all start? Well, believe it or not, it began with something as random as a car breaking down in February of '93. This led Jackson to meet the Chandler family, including their 13-year-old son, Jordan. A friendship blossomed really quickly, and soon Jackson was inviting the whole family for visits to Neverland, taking them on trips to Vegas, and even flying them out to the World Music Awards in Monaco. But that friendship, it didn't last long. It pretty quickly took a dark turn, shifting from this close relationship to one filled with suspicion, and then finally a public accusation. And the person driving all of this? Jordan's father, Evan Chandler. And when I say it happened fast, I mean the timeline here is just incredibly quick. You've got this friendship starting in February, but by May, it had already soured. Jordan's father, Evan, who was a dentist but also a screenwriter, reportedly became really jealous and suspicious. By June, all contact between Jackson and Jordan had stopped, and by July, Chandler had lawyered up. Now, this next part is absolutely critical. Before any formal public allegations of abuse were ever made, Evan Chandler was secretly recorded on a phone call saying this. Jackson's legal team would later use this exact tape as the cornerstone of their whole defense, arguing that this was never about abuse, but about extortion from day one. Right after those threats, things moved into financial negotiations. Chandler's team came to Jackson's team asking for a whopping $20 million. Jackson's side made a couple of counteroffers, but they were all shot down. And it was only after these money talks completely fell apart that Jordan Chandler, for the very first time, told a psychiatrist that he'd been molested by Jackson. And how that first allegation came out is, it's a huge point of contention. You see, Evan Chandler, being a dentist, gave his son a sedative called sodium amytal for a dental procedure. This is a really controversial drug, what some people call a truth serum, but studies have shown it can make people extremely suggestible, even implanting false memories. And it was under the influence of that drug that Jordan first said Jackson had touched him. Okay, so once that formal allegation was on the record, everything just exploded. The police launched a full-blown criminal investigation, the media went into a total frenzy, and Michael Jackson's life was completely turned upside down. And the police, they moved fast. The LAPD opened their case in mid-August, right as Jackson was kicking off a new leg of his world tour. They carried out these really high-profile searches of his properties. Jackson's team fired back, holding a press conference to publicly accuse Chandler of extortion. The whole thing escalated until December, when the investigation culminated in a strip search of Jackson himself. So what was the point of this strip search? Well, the goal was to see if Jackson's body matched the very specific anatomical descriptions that Jordan had given to the investigators. Jackson would later call it the most humiliating ordeal of his life. The police literally photographed his entire body, searching for anything that would back up Jordan's story. And this is where a major contradiction pops up in the case. While police sources at the time were pretty vague, one key detail stands out. Jordan Chandler had specifically claimed that Michael Jackson was circumcised. Fast forward years later, and Jackson's official 2009 autopsy report confirmed he was, in fact, not. And you've got to remember, all of this was happening inside a total media circus. The whole investigation was just chaotic. Police questioned about 30 other kids who knew Jackson, and every single one of them denied any abuse. But at the same time, you had former staff members selling these wild stories to the tabloids for huge paydays, while other witnesses were claiming the police were using really aggressive tactics to try and get them to turn on Jackson. It was a mess. All right, so while that criminal investigation is chugging along, another front opens up. The Chandlers also file a civil lawsuit against Jackson, and this is what leads to one of the most hotly debated decisions in this entire saga. In January of 1994, that civil lawsuit gets settled out of court. The total amount paid out was around $23 million, and that figure covered payments to Jordan, to both of his parents, and to their lawyer.
So here's the big question, right? Why on earth would you settle if you're claiming you're innocent? Well, Jackson's team said he did it against their advice, mainly just to end the whole nightmare and focus on his rapidly declining health. But there's another huge piece to this puzzle: his insurance company. Legal documents later showed that it was the insurance carrier that actually negotiated and paid the settlement. They have a legal right to resolve a claim if they think it's just cheaper and easier than a long court battle, whether their client likes it or not.
Now, it's really, really important to get this straight. Settling the civil case did not make the criminal case go away. The district attorney's office came out and made it crystal clear that their investigation was totally separate and that it was going to continue. And it did, for another 8 months. So, the settlement might have ended the lawsuit, but it couldn't stop the damage. Not even close. The allegations, combined with that massive payout, left a permanent scar on Jackson's career, on his health, and on how the entire world saw him. So what happened with that criminal case that kept going? Well, in the end, nothing. In September 1994, after 13 long months, 2 separate grand juries, and over 400 interviews, the investigation was officially closed. The DA's main reason? A lack of evidence, especially since the Chandler family had stopped cooperating with the prosecution, which left the case without its star witness. The professional fallout was just brutal, and it was immediate. Jackson's partnership with Pepsi, which had been going on for nearly a decade, was dropped. He had to cancel the rest of his huge Dangerous World tour. He lost a big movie deal, and after all this, he never toured in the United States again. And the personal toll was just as bad, if not worse. Jackson became heavily dependent on painkillers to cope with the unbelievable stress. He lost a dangerous amount of weight. At one point, he had to be fed intravenously. The whole ordeal eventually landed him in rehab. So when you step back and look at the whole picture, you're left with this story that's just full of contradictions. You have a massive settlement paid out by an insurance company, but with no admission of guilt. You have a year-long criminal investigation, 2 grand juries, that ends with 0 charges because of a lack of evidence. It all just leaves you with this really complex, lingering question about fame, about justice, and about how a legacy can be shattered, even without a single conviction.